Hi, I'm Julie Ross.
And I'm Gregory Abbey.
And you're listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
Julie is a longtime parent educator and counselor.
And Greg is an actor, writer, and director, and more importantly, a parent just like you.
Through conversations covering a range of different topics, challenges, and roadblocks, we hope to give you a few of Julie's tools that might just help make parenting a little bit easier.
Look, nobody's perfect, and parenting is challenging, to say the least. With a few skills under our belts, though, we might just be able to be good enough parents and enjoy the journey and our children a little bit more in the process.
Welcome back to the Parenting Horizons podcast. It's been a while.
It does feel like it has been a while.
Well, it's nice.
Yeah.
We've had some great guests,
Yeah.
but we haven't got to sit face to face, so it's good to see you.
It's good to see you, too.
And we were kind of talking about next topics, and I think this is going to come out before Christmas, which I know isn't a holiday for everyone, but a holiday for a lot of people. And we were kind of going over possible topics. We do have some great guests coming up, but you and I were talking about what we could talk about. And it just sort of popped in my head with Christmas coming, this idea of Santa Claus, which led me to the idea of sort of truths and half-truths. How honest are you with your kids? What do you keep from them? What do you share with them? And I sort of wanted to I thought we could use Santa, the Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, those sort of myths, I guess, fantasies.
Sure.
And how you deal with them with your kids. And I was kind of thinking, you'll have to tell me your experience. I don't really remember a definitive moment of realizing that Santa wasn't real. I definitely never had a conversation with my parents about it. Mm-hmm. But somewhere along the line, it sort of sunk in that Santa was not real.
Right.
And I have a feeling my kids, we never got asked directly about it. Do you remember, did you have a definitive moment where you were like, oh, this is not real?
I don't remember it in my own life, but there was a definitive moment, for both of my kids. So my daughter kind of accidentally found out that Santa wasn't real when she was in probably 5th or 6th grade, which is kind of late for kids to stop believing. Mm-hmm. But she had said something, or a couple of things that made me think maybe her belief was fading out. But I didn't disclose it to her. But that year she drew this picture for Santa. You know how you leave milk and cookies? So she drew this picture for Santa. It was so good that I kept it and put it in my drawer, by my bed. And Christmas came and went. But then she opened the drawer. And so she came across it in my drawer, and she was livid with me. She said, "Why do you have this picture that I gave to Santa Claus? Why? Wait a minute. Are you Santa?" And I thought, oh, man, I blew this big time.
So wait a second. So this is perfect. So what did you say to her in the moment?
I said, "Sweetheart, let's just talk for a minute." I said, "Santa Claus is a very important tradition in our family. And Santa needs helpers. So, because it's a spirit, it's not a person. Santa it's the spirit of Christmas, the giving spirit. And so, yes, Mommy and Daddy do the things that, put the presents under the tree and wrap the presents.
But was she devastated by that, though? Or had she reached an age where she was starting to put it together?
I think if you were to ask her, I think she would say she was devastated.
So that's the question.
I was like, how do I manage this? Because I didn't mean for her to find this drawing. I kind of thought she had already stopped believing. And I have to tell about my son, too, because at about age, so my daughter was probably in 6th grade. My son was probably in 1st grade.
Okay.
And my son came to me one day and put their hands on their hips, and they said, "There is no Santa Claus."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, of course there is." And they said, "No, there's not. Tell me the truth." So I said, "Okay, you're right. There's a spirit." Blah, blah. I went through the whole, there's a spirit of Christmas, blah, blah, blah. Mommy and Daddy do all the work. And they said, "I thought so." They were relieved, Greg. They couldn't logically put together how this large man gets down a chimney that we don't have in New York.
Sure.
So they came at from a very logical point of view. What's funny, though, is that later that year or after Christmas the next year, they said, I know there's no Santa. What I can't figure out is how the stockings get stuffed.
So it's there was still a little mystery there.
Still a little mystery.
So it sounds like to me, I mean, I guess it's circumstantial, right? So because what if you, and this is kind of my question for you. So, and I'm sure it differs by age, depending, that will dictate how you handle it. But what if you have a first grader, which that's like prime Santa. But what if you're a first grader that comes home, that believes, that loves, as opposed to just coming right out and asking you, maybe, is Santa real? What if another child at school has told them that Santa isn't real? If this is a kid that comes home and is like totally thrown, totally devastated by this, and asks you, Mom, Johnny said that Santa isn't real. Is he real? Is he real? Like, what would you do?
So I'm a big believer in maintaining these magical moments for kids. We only have a short time to believe in Santa or the Tooth Fairy.
Or the Easter Bunny.
Or the Easter Bunny, right. Or whatever. And I think it's magical. I think it's really fun to believe in that.
Right.
So I encourage parents to try to maintain the fantasy.
Sure.
So if your kid comes home and says, Susie told me that Santa isn't real, I would say, wow, really? That seems kind of extreme. I wonder why she would not believe in Santa. Of course Santa's real. And I would absolutely 100% maintain that Santa's real. And that, listen, Santa's going to bring Susie presents no matter what, because right. Santa, you can believe in Santa or not believe in Santa. It doesn't make any difference to Santa. Santa's still going to bring gifts. And I believe in Santa. I would tell the child, I believe in Santa. Because in a sense, Greg, I do.
Well, yeah, I think it's... sure. The spirit
and it's so fun.
I feel like my niece was almost 20 years old and still trying to hold on to the idea, like in a denial part of it. I mean, I guess this is kind of obvious. Like a parent obviously shouldn't come out at first grade and say, no, I don't like to lie to my kids, so I'm going to be honest. Because that idea is so fun to hold on to, you know, that Santa comes and delivers the presents. So that's what you do. So if the kid came home and said, just flat out asked you, certainly at that age, you'd keep that magic going. Because why wouldn't you?
Well, I think it's different. When my son asked me, they had figured it out themselves. They weren't saying that Susie said to them that there was no Santa and they were crying because Susie denied their belief, right? They put it together. My son's a very logical thinker, and they had pieced it together and gone, this is not possible. And it was clear to me that they really thought it wasn't possible. And the look of relief on their face when I said, okay, you're right. There is no man in a red and white suit that comes through our window or down the chimney. You're right. That doesn't exist. And they were like, phew. So some of it depends, so much depends on your child's age, on their ability for logical thought, etc. But generally, kids up until at least the age of 10 have what we call magical thought, which allows us to present them with things that are wondrous, like magic. It's so easy to do bad magic.
Right. I have a terrible quarter trick that up until like age 8,
oh man,
is the biggest.
It's the biggest thrill.
Right.
And they just love it, right? And Santa, I mean, it's thrilling to hold on to that magic, to believe if you blow the candles out on your birthday cake and make a wish, it's going to come true. Or if you wish on a star, it's going to come true.
Yeah, what's more fun than that?
It's so fun. It's so fun to believe in that, right?
Well, it feels like a lot of times when we do these podcasts and these episodes, I always go back to listen to heart, which I feel like is kind of always your main theme.
Yeah.
And it sort of seems like in all the other circumstances, no matter what we're talking about, is that you kind of show up in the moment for what you're getting. So with your son, they are bringing you something that you're reacting to in that moment. they were logical. It was a relief to them. That's how you wanted to deal with it. But
Yep.
you just got to, see the circumstance. And I would imagine, I mean, it probably happened for me like I think it happened for my kids. There was never a discussion, and eventually it kind of fades away on its own. I think it's in that terrible circumstance where you find out accidentally, or someone tells you at school, or something happens when they're young that could be, I can imagine, could be devastating for some kids.
Yes, my daughter was devastated. I think if we called her right now, she'd be like, yeah, Greg, I was devastated.
We should call her in, special guest.
But she got over it, because the way you handle it when they find out, no matter how they find out, whether they come to it on their own, whether they're told it, whether they accidentally experience it, the way you handle it becomes part of the story
that's the huge piece
that lives on, right? One of the other things I told her, I said, now you're part of the magic for your younger brother. You are part of the magic. You get to be the keeper of this magic now. And that was intriguing. She was like, oh, I get to be the keeper of the magic.
Well, also in keeping that magic going. So like, you don't want to go running around. Don't break this for other people if you don't believe anymore, Exactly.
And that's what I encourage parents to say, now that you're part of the keeper of the magic, you're part of the kind of grown-up piece of this.
Right.
It's important not to ruin it for anybody.
That's great.
Else.
So I think that sort of started, when we were talking about that, it just got me thinking more about secrets and what you keep from your kids, and when is it okay to lie to your kids and when is it not? How do you be honest? How honest are you? I'm sure it's circumstantial, obviously, depending on the kid themselves, the age. And so I just wanted to cover a couple of thoughts I had and see what you thought about it. So I started thinking about, like, let's say finances. And so I have an actual real world. I don't know these people. So if my friend knows the couple, and the circumstance that he told me is that the husband was like a big finance guy, made a lot of money, and lost his job, having to do with like a cancel culture sort of thing, which, to be honest, could be debated whether it made sense, but that's beside the point. So the guy went from 0 to 60. Let's say, I don't know how much he was making, but let's say he's making $600,000 to $800,000 a year. Lost his job, lost his health insurance. They have kids in college, and it's been like terrible. He can't get rehired.
Oh, wow.
So they have kids. They have several kids. And so let's say in a circumstance like that, or just money in general, like, how much do you share with your kids? And in an extraordinary circumstance like that, how much would you share?
So I believe that if your child can see, hear, kind of go to the five senses, can see the circumstances have changed, he overhears that the circumstances have changed. They're not going to taste the circumstances changing. They're not going to necessarily be able to touch that.
Yeah, but if suddenly dad is home more.
Precisely.
Right.
So that's where I think you have to talk about it, because to deny what they are sensing with their five senses is akin to gaslighting. So there's going to be more tension in the house probably. If dad doesn't have a job and has no prospects for a job and has lost his health insurance, or mom or whoever, there's going to be more tension naturally. There might be depression associated with it.
Sure.
It's very common when people have a job, to have their identity wrapped up in it.
Right.
So it's a blow to the ego. And depression is often a byproduct of that. So if the kid can see something's wrong or can intuit that something's wrong, I think it's really important to talk to the kid about it.
And does it depend? Obviously, it must depend on the age of the child, depending on how much detail you go into what's going on.
Yeah, and it not only how much detail, but how you tell the child. So, the younger the child, first of all, the more black and white they are as a thinker. And, second of all, they don't need the
gory details. In terms of young kids, what are some of the things you want to keep in mind when you're sharing? Because I think like just what you said with how you talk about Santa Claus and that moment where they might find out is part of the story and dictates how they're going to experience it. How
Right.
you sit down and actually share the information with them. So let's say it's a young child. What are the things to keep in mind if you're sharing like
Financial
yeah.
distress. Well, first of all, I mean, I'm a big believer in telling the truth. I think secrets, the fantasy and myth secrets aside, like, I think it's fine to keep a secret that's quote unquote that Santa
Magic.
is
And positive.
yeah. But secrets generally kill families. I don't mean literally, but they destroy trust, they destroy relationships, and they will always be found out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in AA, but that's a saying in AA. You're only as sick as your secrets. Like that's a big part of sobriety and getting healthy is sort of unearthing this stuff, you know?
Yeah, precisely. And I believe that wholeheartedly from personal as well as professional experience. So when when your child asks you, like in the case of your friend, really no matter what the age of the child, you want to be truthful, but you want to keep it simple.
Right.
And so by simple, there we take into account the developmental age of the child.
In terms of how much information you're going to give.
Exactly. And then we want to only answer questions that we've been asked.
I think you've said this before. You've said this a lot, actually, is that parents, especially in a moment where maybe they feel anxious or insecure or unsure, talk too much.
Oh, 100%. And kids pick up on that in a split second. And they're like, what? You're anxious. I should be anxious too, right?
Right.
So part of it, like with your friend, part of it is, or your friend's friend, part of it is putting some reassurance out there. You know, if it's happening to you, it's important that you say, listen, I want to talk to you guys about something. Everything's fine, is going to be fine. And I lost my job. So you're going to notice that there are going to be some changes in financial situation. And I'm resilient.
Right.
And I will figure it out.
Even if you're not feeling resilient, the idea is that you want to reassure the kid because you don't want them taking on your anxiety, frustrations, anger.
Correct.
Depression.
Correct. Because it's still a grown-up problem.
Right.
Right. So we don't want to lay that on our kids. I think it was our guest, Barbara Nussbaum, who said, we have to, as parents, it's our job to steer the ship in the storm. And so that means whether or not the storm is happening directly to us, it's still our job to steer the ship.
Well, and I think the other point you've made in the past is that, and you can remake it as this idea, like let's say it's a family of 5, that if someone is suffering in the family, it affects the whole unit, right?
Right, exactly.
And I guess that's another reason why to get it out on the table.
Exactly. And it's okay. It's you can steer the ship and be sad.
Mm-hmm.
You can steer the ship and be anxious. You can steer the ship and be what your children need to know is that you're resilient and you will find a way out of this. And you're still the parent, and this is not a problem that they need to be worried about.
Even if you don't necessarily feel that way, you mean?
Even if
you gotta fake it till you make it.
That's right. And that's one of those. So then we can kind of go back to, so is that a lie then?
Well,
are you telling
that's
a lie
you
within
wanna,
the truth?
Well, you're saying that's a lie you want to tell. Why? Because you don't want the child taking on any of the stress or anxiety.
Precisely. They're children, whether they're college age or not. Now, the older they get, and I know families for whom this is the case, when, the parents split up or a parent loses the job, an older child, such as a college age child, may say, listen, here's how I can help. I'm going to get an extra job while I'm in college that will allow me to pay for my room and board, let's say, so that you don't have to worry about that anymore. That's developmentally appropriate.
Well, it sounds like you need to modulate it depending. Like if you have 4 kids and there's a range of ages, like you can't do a family meeting with everyone and tell them what's going on, right? I mean, it seems like, I'm assuming that's what you would advise, right? You're going to talk to the 10-year-old different than you are the 20-year-old.
Precisely.
I mean, I feel like, because I rush, like everyone rushes. And the other thing you say a lot is like, it's not a 4-alarm fire. And this is a moment that's really important. So
Yes.
take the time, because it's actually not that long. Like, let's say you're going to sit down and have a 15-minute conversation with your 20-year-old about what's going on. Take the time to sit down and have it with your 8-year-old, especially like you said. And I'm sort of piecing this together as you're talking. Like, if this stuff is sort of out there and they're not dummies, like they're probably picking up and sensing something too.
100% they are. And what they make up in their imagination is going to be far worse than whatever is actually going on generally. But most of the time, they're going to imagine, that you're dying.
Mm-hmm.
Because they sense the secret in the house. They sense the thing that nobody's talking about. And so we owe it to them to be honest.
Right.
And to say, hey, listen, here's what's going on. I might be a little emotional about it, even as I talk to you, but I still feel very positive about, what the outcome's going to be at the very end of the game. It's going to be okay.
I'm assuming, because the other things I was sort of thinking about when I thought, well, what are some things that come up? The first thing was finances, whether it's you lost your job or just in general, talking to your kids about your money and your financial situation. But what about that? What if it's not like a tragedy? Like, I'm assuming you wouldn't say, you don't have to tell your kids how much money you make, but how forthright should you be with your kids?
Yeah. Well, so I think that falls into the category of, if they ask you, most of the time, I would want you to ballpark the truth.
Right.
Right. And I say ballpark because I also don't think kids need to know everything. I think there are things that can be kept private. So let's just talk about sex. There's an area where I think parents can be private. But if your child comes up to you and says, hey, Mom, Dad, do you have sex with my other parent? Yes.
Well, it'd be absurd to be like, never, no, one time,
right?
One time for you,
right? So we have an obligation to be truthful about that kind of stuff. We don't have to go into the Kama Sutra and like all of the positions and along those same lines, we don't have to divulge like how many sexual partners we had before.
Sure. I like this idea of ballparking the truth. And also, I think what you said before, it seems like it can be applied to the other things I sort of wanted to talk about. But, keep it simple, be direct, answer only what is asked. And I like that you said, like, if you don't necessarily have to talk about it, but if a child comes to you and asks a direct question, I don't know that you have an obligation, but I think you would say, like, if they ask you a direct question, you need to do your best to try to answer it. You don't need to be fully forthright.
Right. Well,
ballpark the truth.
Ballpark
it's going to be my autobiography's title, I think. Gregory Abbey, Ballparking the Truth. I kind of like that. I like that.
Yeah. And so, along those lines, we could go into the idea of, what if your child says, Mom, Dad, did you ever do cocaine?
Right.
Did you ever do meth? Did you ever do
acid, LSD, smoke pot, get arrested? I mean, I imagine you would say to be as truthful as you can, right?
Yeah. My advice is that we say, if you did, that you say something like, yes, I did. It was a very dangerous choice, for certain of those things.
Right.
20/20 hindsight, it was a dangerous choice, and I wish that I hadn't done it. Now, then we can come to the question, right? The next logical question that follows is, but what if you aren't sorry you did it?
Right.
What if you had a great rip-roaring time and there were no consequences? I would still say, that there's a lie I would tell. I would say it was a dangerous choice and I wish I hadn't, even though you loved it. But
you don't think you could tell both? I mean, couldn't you say, because I don't know, I feel like to be totally untruthful about the part, is it possible to share both sides? Like to say, you know what, I had a really good time. Like if it's drugs,
right.
I actually had a really good time, because usually it's a mixed bag anyway. Like you can have really fun, but I lost 3 days of my life after. I've seen some friends have trouble with it. I mean, to me, what you've always communicated is just have an open conversation about that stuff.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it depends on the drug. Like,
right? There's certain drugs.
Meth. I mean, yeah, you don't want to be like, it was incredible.
Right?
That's it. It was just great.
Yeah, I'm not talking about I'm not talking
Getting drunk,
about
getting
alcohol.
high.
I'm not talking about, weed. I'm really not even so much talking about mushrooms.
Right. I mean, you could talk about cocaine in a way that you had a great time, but also talk about all the downfalls of.
Precisely. So, and that's where, I mean, it's drugs is this huge category.
Yeah, yeah.
So for the ones that are really dangerous, right, that could kill you
right
in a nanosecond.
Right.
I would say I did, but it was a dangerous choice. I think part of this is educating too, because what we know, for example, about some of the drugs that are available to kids now are available through the internet, and they're laced with fentanyl, and fentanyl will kill you immediately. And so I think it's important to say, like, for example, whatever drug they're asking about, if you did it, it was different back then.
Sure.
It wasn't over the internet.
Well, it's not, like you said, it's like such a big category. I think it can be sort of a broad conversation. But again, I keep coming back to, because I do this, and I think you say parents do this a lot too, is like there's a over talking.
Yes.
And I would think, I mean, children must get flooded too at a certain point if it's too much, right?
100%. Which is why, we need to deliver, first of all, go back to Ballpark the Truth. And then go back to also one of our basic principles, which is keep it simple and leave room for the questions.
Right.
And if it does regard truly dangerous behavior that you did, I would say yes, and it was dangerous.
Sure, yeah. Would you, I mean, because the other things I wanted to talk to you about, it sort of seems like you would apply similarly. So I was thinking about like mental illness. It's kind of a reach. I don't know what happened with this guy, but what if one of the parents has depression or anxiety, finds out they're bipolar? Is it sort of the same idea that if the child is seeing a difference, it's what's right in front of them is what you have to deal with?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the reasons that mental illness is still so stigmatized in our society, and when it shouldn't be, is that people keep it a secret. So they keep, about themselves even. They'll keep it a secret that they're on anti-anxiety medication or antidepressants. And so I feel like it's really important that we actually dialogue with our kids around mental illness, destigmatize it, say, I'm sure you've noticed that Uncle Joe. I'm trying to take some of the common names. I feel bad for like Joe and Susie, all the Joes and Susies out there.
Uncle Joe with the depression and anxiety.
So Uncle
but if
Aaron,
they're seeing it right in front of them, Uncle Aaron, let's call him Uncle Aaron.
Uncle Aaron.
I mean, you would always argue like, don't gaslight. Like, let's not pretend like this is not existing and going on.
Yeah, and I would say, I'm sure that you've noticed that Uncle Aaron, let's say, sometimes behaves erratically and, can be in a great mood at one moment and then turn on a dime. And Uncle Aaron actually has a mental illness, and he's seeking treatment or not seeking treatment. He has medication. He doesn't have medication, but that's what you're seeing. And it's just part of who Uncle Aaron is.
I love this idea too that you just said about, because I'm not great at this, but when you don't go on and on and on, that you leave room for other questions from the kid, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is that if you introduce these ideas and don't shy away from them, it doesn't mean you have to give a dissertation on depression. I mean, depression and anxiety, these are really common things. So if the child, down the road starts to run into it, it doesn't feel like such a mystery if you've had sort of a conversation about it, right?
Right, exactly. Because we really, we don't know what our child's life holds in store for them. So we want to make sure that we haven't stigmatized certain things for which they can get help.
Right.
because then there's all this needless suffering that happens. But if we're like, yeah, mental illness, if you have diabetes, you go to the doctor and you get treatment for diabetes.
Sure.
If you have schizophrenia, you go to the doctor and get treatment for schizophrenia. If you have, it's all within the same realm of help exists. I think one of the things that's tough is that because mental illness is so stigmatized, and I'm maybe going a little out on a limb here, but I believe it. So
let's go.
Okay. People who then have mental illness, who do become depressed or, are mentally in a tremendous amount of pain, don't see that there's a way out from that.
Right.
And that can cause a person to take their own life when there are resources. But we've stigmatized the whole thing. Don't ask for help. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
And so I think being honest about mental illness or addiction, right, which may run in a family, I think it's important.
Well, I think the other thing I'm taking away, which I've taken away the whole time that we've been doing this, is I guess you would call it one of your principles. Because as we go through each of these literal things, whether it's finances, mental illness, I want to talk about like divorce a little bit, separation, that you're establishing a dynamic with your kid, which is about having an open dialogue about things.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, wouldn't you say that's one of the most important things that you kind of want to teach and talk about?
Because
that's all. As you're keep talking, I keep thinking like, oh yeah, this is another opportunity. It's not going to be perfect, but you get these shots at sort of like, how do I talk to my kid? How do I have a dialogue? So not only am I sharing stuff with them, but then when they're in trouble, we've gone through some stuff that they will come to me or a friend or a therapist or whatever, but they start to develop that muscle of like, of talking about the harder stuff.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think communication, clear, honest, effective communication is the key to every relationship that we will ever have. And it becomes most important in the parent-child relationship. And that doesn't mean, Greg, that you should overshare.
Right.
Because there are things that kids don't need to be privy to. They don't need to be, whether, like we already talked about sex, but like, they don't need to know the changes in the stock market, right?
Sure.
They just need to know kind of the global stuff that might affect them. Otherwise, you can keep some of it private unless you're asked a direct question.
I mean, I'm assuming you're just going to say this is similar, but when I was going through these, so I'm thinking finances, mental illness, we really need to do a whole episode kind of on divorce and what happens when a relationship is falling apart.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's such a complex situation. But what about in that situation? And that also has a bunch of different variables I don't even know. But if you picked a couple that, again, I imagine you would say, like, if the child is seeing the fighting going on, that's something you have to sort of deal with.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
how honest are you, if you're struggling in your marriage, how honest are you about the relationship with your kids?
Well, again, I think it comes back to what is the child's experience of this? That's one thing it comes back to. I want to just float a story. As a child of divorce myself, my parents never hinted that they were in trouble. I went through up until 9 years old.
You had no clue?
No clue.
Okay.
I picked up on little things, like I noticed when we went on vacation and they were walking together, they wouldn't hold hands.
Mm-hmm.
But it was subtle things, right? And on the very rare occasion that they had an argument, I'd say, "Why are you arguing?" And they said, "We're not arguing, we're discussing."
Which wasn't real.
No, because, the tone of voice,
Sure,
everything was angry. It was very rare, though. I had no idea until I overheard. I was in the car. My dad was picking me up at my grandmother's house. I was in the car. He was saying goodbye to his mother. And I overheard the word separation. It was the first I heard of it. Talk about devastating. That was...
Because it was such a curveball, you mean?
Yeah. That it ripped me in half.
Wow.
I I mean, I couldn't stop crying. I was hysterical. I made my father call my mother, who was in rehearsals for a show, and get her to the phone. I
Wow.
apparently lost my mind. I screamed. I couldn't, like, I was incoherent. I was so upset. So, if you are in the process, if you have a troubled marriage, if you're in the process of getting separated, I think it's important to keep the kids in the loop on that. So that it's not just, oh, one day,
Out of the blue.
out of the blue, your other parent is moving out.
Right.
Looky, you'll have two houses, right?
Right.
That's very fake. Now, there are amicable separations.
Right. And there's
And
unamicable.
and most of the
they're
time,
terrible.
most of the time, it's not amicable at all.
Right.
Most of the time, it's very, very, it's very laden. And, you're right. We should do a whole episode about it, about kind of how to manage it. But I think if you know that there's going to be a life-changing circumstance, I think you owe it to your child to say, hey, listen, we want to keep you apprised of stuff. I know we don't fight very much, but we really aren't in the same relationship that we were when we got married.
Well, and I would assume you would say the same thing, like keep it simple, direct, answer only what's asked, leave room for questions, don't go on and on.
Exactly.
The other thing that I just thought of that you've talked about before, but I want you to reiterate the idea of, in these circumstances, when you have the opportunity to talk to your child about whatever it is, depression, financing, that it's important that you, and I'm saying this to remind me if this is correct, that it's important for the parent to take the time to get clear about how they feel about it before they sit down and share it. And you've said even to write out a script.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big believer in scripting, because when we're anxious or when we're upset or flooded or overwhelmed, I mean, it doesn't matter. If we're having a big feeling, it's very hard to be articulate in our communication. Especially in the case of divorce, a script is, I would say, critical. And
keeps you tethered, I would imagine.
It keeps you tethered. And it is part of creating what we call the divorce story, which is, in a quote unquote good divorce, if you want to call it that, both partners who are divorcing will tell the same story to the child, no matter what the circumstances of the divorce are. So it's one of those things that, like, if there's infidelity, that should not be told. I mean, you should lie about that. The divorce story is something that when the child goes to either parent, they're going to hear the story the same way every single time.
Because that's stabilizing for the child?
Exactly. One of the biggest problems in divorce is what we call conflict of loyalties. And the child feels automatically like they have to choose between one parent or the other parent. Because now the parents aren't together. Now the parents are opposing one another. If you have a common divorce story that has been scripted and that gets told over and over again, then the child no longer feels the need to be loyal to one parent over the other parent.
Right.
And that's really important, because kids, for the most part, with the exception of abusive relationships, right? Kids need both parents.
Sure.
They need to have that relationship. They get different things from each parent.
Yeah, and count on both of them.
Yeah, exactly. So that scripting becomes very important in a divorce scenario. Not a lot of couples are at a place where they can sit down and craft together a common story.
Right.
Because there's often a lot of blame that
Sure.
goes along with divorce. Well, you did this, you did that. It's not my fault, it's your fault, that kind of thing. But if you can, that's the best case scenario.
I want to wrap up because we usually do this at the end of, like, what are some of the things, just to hit them again, that you hold on to? If this is an episode about the truths you kind of share with your kids and the things you don't, and the things you might keep from them, what are a couple of the main things to keep in mind?
Yeah, and you notice we went from
Santa to divorce.
Santa to divorce. Nice.
We covered the gamut. That's all right. We're light and dark today. I love that we're start with I'm glad that we've settled on, not that this was a surprise. Santa, Easter Bunny, Tooth Fairy is magic. You can keep it going as long as you can.
That's 100%.
Okay,
yep.
I like that one. And some of these harder discussions about finances, mental illness, divorce, separation. I guess what do you share with the kids and what do you keep in mind when you share?
Well, first of all, if it's observable by the child, you should talk about it.
Right.
Okay, so that's the most important thing. Or if it's going to be life-changing, as it was for me when my parents got divorced, right? Even though it wasn't necessarily visible to me that that was happening, you should share it. Don't spring things on kids. It's just not a good idea. What you share, how much you share, let's say, is going to be dependent partly on the child's developmental stage.
Sure.
The younger they are, the simpler you make it. The older they are, the more complex you can make it. Having said that, in general, it's a good idea to keep your part of the conversation simple and direct, right? And leave room for questions. So you can even pause. You can say, listen, I have, something difficult to tell you that I'm sure you're going to have questions about.
Right.
So I'm just going to tell you a little bit, and then I'm going to let you ask questions.
The way. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
and
you can
if they
stop.
don't have questions, you can keep. That's kind of great advice too, is to take your time, and especially if it's a lot, because that can be a lot to take in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But let's just close with Santa is magic.
Santa is magic. So is the Easter Bunny. So is the Tooth Fairy. Surprise parties are magic.
Right.
Blowing out candles on a birthday cake is magic. Wishing on a star is magic. Keep the magic alive, because the reality can be, and probably, at one point or another is going to be difficult.
Sure.
So why not keep as much magic in their lives, your children's lives, and even in your own life as possible? Thanks for listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with your family and friends. And if you'd like to hear more about Julie's work, join one of her parenting groups, or see about individual counseling, please visit parentinghorizons.com. Or you can email Julie at julie.ross@parentinghorizons.com.
See you next time.